Oh. Mm. So, good morning, everyone. Before we start the class, I have certain questions with respect to what we were studying in the last class. Um, Suryavamshi, please unmute. Suryavamshi, kindly unmute.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. What do you mean by zones of pollution in a river stream?
Ma'am? Sorry.
Zones of pollution in a river stream.
Ma'am, I couldn't hear you.
I'm not audible. Huh?
No.
1 second. Let me just see whether my. It's full only. Zones of pollution. Talking slowly because I don't know. Shinha ma'am is also starting the class.
Zones of pollution
In a
in
river.
water, ma'am.
In a river stream. Yeah. Well, usually they will talk about it in terms of river, stream, etc. Tell me.
One is clear water.
Whenever you talk about this, you have to tell as it progresses. Can you write the last stage first? You cannot talk. Okay, if it is like, immaterial points, factors to be considered and things like that, you can mix up the points and write. That will not make a difference.
I'm not getting.
This is a very, very important topic. I have been stressing about this since yesterday, and when I was taking the oxygen sacker. Okay, Sanju, can you unmute Sanju? Can you tell me what are the zones of pollution in a river or stream with respect to, the discharge of, we were talking about dilution as a method of disposal, and with respect to that.
Ma'am, like point source of pollution, line source of pollution.
Zone, Z-O-N-E, not so.
Ma'am, I got it, ma'am. Can I tell you?
Okay, 1 minute, Sanju. Then you mute, Sanju.
Yes.
Yes, carry on, Suryavamshi.
Zone of degradation.
Very good.
Then zone of active decomposition.
Okay.
Then zone of recovery.
Correct.
And then zone of clear water.
Okay. Now, what I want you to tell me is what happens in the zone of degradation?
Zone of degradation.
Yes.
Zone of
this much, if you are able to clearly understand, you will be able to explain. Yesterday, I showed you one graph, remember?
Yes, ma'am.
With respect to zones of pollution, that immediately, if you look like, it will you will think you are explaining the oxygen sacker, but there is a difference. So, first tell me what happens in the zone of degradation.
When the sewage comes in contact with the clear water, the water degrades.
Yeah. So, what are the significant, observations?
The DO level will reduce.
DO will come down. They say it's reduced to about 40%. Okay. The DO reduces to 40%. Yesterday, when we were talking about the physical and chemical and biological indications or indices,
Yes,
I told you about certain things. Can you just recollect and tell me what all they are?
1 second.
Will there, think of it in this way. Will there be any change in the color of water? Will there be any sludge or material depositing at the bottom? In those terms.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So initially, when immediate mixing is happening, whatever organisms are there will not suddenly disappear. Understood? They will not get killed or they will not go away from there suddenly. But you will see that there is a color change, sudden turbid conditions, depositions at the bottom, reduction of DO, So slowly the life forms changes will start to take place there. Clear? Then what is the next zone?
Next is zone of decomposition.
Active decomposition. Okay.
Active
Here, what can you tell will be the, what to say, in terms of the actions that are happening, in terms of physical
biological activity will happen where the organisms present, it will decompose the waste.
decompose. There are chances of anaerobic decomposition happening. Okay. And there are chances of products of decomposition. Can you tell me what are the products of anaerobic decomposition? No. Whenever you think of aerobic decomposition, basically after decomposing, the decomposing solids, leaving it aside, you are expected to have carbon dioxide and water only. Whereas if it is anaerobic decomposition, you may have methane, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and such gases will be liberated. Now, since there is active decomposition happening here, there is a chance that you have seen when decomposition happens, small bits and particles will become lighter and they will float on the surface of water and you will get a scum like formed on the surface of water. And at this point of time, there will be disappearance of many organisms, higher fish forms and things like that will disappear. Yeah. Okay, that's in Suryavamshi. Sanju, can you tell me about the zone of recovery?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes, Sanju. Zone of recovery and zone of clear water. What are the indications?
Ma'am, zone of recovery is when the DO starts increasing, ma'am. When the sewage is left into the very deep of the clear water, the DO starts increasing.
Why,
When all the
why that increase is happening? See, DO should all
because all the organisms is dead.
is getting decomposed. Okay, so DO is already getting mixed with water every time. Yesterday we looked at two curves below the oxygen curve, where I told you one is the deoxygenation and one is the reoxygenation or reaeration. So DO is always getting mixed with the water, but the problem is that DO is getting utilized that fast also when there is heavy organic load. So a point where you are seeing the increase in DO is because that the organic matter is getting stabilized. So whatever oxygen is now getting dissolved in the water remains there as dissolved oxygen, and it is available for the plant life and the aquatic life to grow. So in that recovery stage, you will see the water becoming clearer, you will see organisms coming back, you will see an increase in DO. This is the way you have to understand it. Clear? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the last one is pretty easy.
And yes, last one is the zone of clear water.
Yeah.
In that, all the sediments and all this organic waste and all
No more
is left at the top.
You're getting, your voice is breaking in between. Okay, so no, there will be no more sludge at the bottom. The DO will have risen almost to, and whenever we use the word saturation, we have to be very careful with that word. What is saturation DO connected to, Sanju?
Saturation DO is like 100%. It is the maximum level at which the oxygen can be dissolved
But
in
there
water.
is a connected sentence to that. The condition there is the temperature. Understood? So when I say saturation DO, it depends on what temperature we are talking about. So saturation DO, it is reaching, but based on what is the temperature of water. So DO is coming back to its original form. The, what to say, oxygen balance is maintained. All the organic forms which were present in the water, like aquatic fish or whatever was there, gets replaced and comes
Is
back.
coming back.
Okay, all these things happen in the clear zone. But again,
Yes.
yesterday when we discussed, I think you can mute. Vikas TC, please unmute.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Vikas. So yesterday I tried to explain to you the, what to say, a curve which was called as the oxygen SAG curve. Okay, so what does this oxygen sag curve mean? Or what does it depict? That graph. Do you remember what is on the x-axis and what is the y-axis of that particular curve?
Kind of.
Try. Make an attempt.
Ma'am, the concentration of dissolved oxygen.
Is on the which axis? It is dissolved oxygen, but we see as percentage, okay, of dissolved oxygen.
Yes, ma'am.
And it is on the vertical axis.
Okay.
Okay. And what do you have on the x-axis? What do you have on the x-axis?
Ma'am, discharge pollutant.
Wait, not discharge. Time of flow.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll do one thing. Give me 1 minute. I will just go back to my presentation. Quickly, we will look at that and then we will go forward. Yeah. Now I want all of you to concentrate on this particular graph once again. Understood? So here, this is the oxygen or DO content. If you have a book with you, kindly draw this graph so that you understand that perfectly. You have the DO content on the y-axis. You have the time of flow on the x-axis. Okay. So if you see here, this is the point where the waste is getting discharged into the stream. And there is a line on top which gives us the saturation DO. Again, we are calling this 100% saturation. But like I told you yesterday, that saturation will depend on what is the temperature of the water there. Okay, again, I will ask that question to Anmol. Please unmute.
Yes, ma'am.
Which is the temperature at which we can have maximum dissolved oxygen, and what is the dissolved oxygen concentration at that temperature?
Ma'am, your voice is not clear, ma'am.
Dissolved oxygen is maximum at what temperature? Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Please tell. Yesterday we discussed.
Sorry, ma'am.
Don't remember?
No, ma'am, I don't remember.
Okay, then please mute yourself. Who is the other person now? Chandana? Chandana?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me what is the temperature at which we expect maximum dissolved oxygen concentration, and what is that value? Yesterday it was discussed.
I don't know, ma'am. Is it 0, ma'am?
Yeah, at 0 degrees.
0 degree.
What is the oxygen concentration? I told you yesterday very specifically. That's why I said just logging in, putting it, and then roaming around is no use.
Ma'am, 14.63, ma'am.
Okay. In what units?
Mg per liter.
Okay. So I want all of you to remember this once again. When I say maximum DO concentration, at 0 degrees, we are having 14.63 milligram per liter dissolved oxygen possible. But we know that in all cases, in this particular condition, the water cannot be at 0 degrees. Okay. There is one more condition which I told you people to remember. That is at a temperature of 30 degrees. It is half of this, 7.6 milligrams per liter. Is it so difficult for you to remember? 0 degrees, the maximum dissolved oxygen possible is 14.6. Okay, and at 30 degrees, it comes down to 7.63. So you will have a variation of this type, and because you know both the ends, you will be able to interpolate and tell roughly at 20 degrees, 25 degrees, what will be the DO. So roughly 8 or 7.6, 7 we are saying is 30 degrees. So from for a temperature of around 25 degrees, we may have 8. If you correctly interpolate, you will get the value, correct, exact value. So it becomes easy for you to remember. So kindly memorize these two values today. And if I am telling this line or I am drawing this line, saturation DO, it depends on the water that I am talking about here. And when the waste is being discharged, you see at that time, there is no need that your DO, this line represents your DO levels, actual DO levels. And the saturation DO minus the DO at a particular time will give what is called as the DO deficit. And all these DO, D naught, DT, DC are all deficits. So from saturation, how much lower is the actual concentration of DO present in the water at that particular time? So if you see here, when the waste is getting discharged, at that time also DO is not saturation DO, because natural organisms will be acting on whatever plankton, dead, suddenly algae may die, or some organic, living form dies, that will get automatically decomposed, right? So it's a living environment, this stream or river that we are talking about. So there is no reason why at every point of, there may be a point of time when it is reaching the saturation DO. But when you draw the graph, you have to be very careful that you do not touch it from this point and draw. So at point here, we are calling this as the origin point, because that is a place where we are dropping the waste into the water. You will see that there is a DO deficit. That's called as the original deficit. And deficit, when I say, is the difference between the saturation and the DO that is present there at any particular time. You can see it here. It is put in the slide. Okay, oxygen deficit, D, whether it is D naught at origin, DT at a particular time, whatever is saturation DO minus the original DO. So when a river is flowing and waste is getting decomposed, put into it, we saw how the zones of degradation are going, and the same pattern will be followed by your oxygen also, because it is oxygen that is getting influenced mainly. And that is why your oxygen deficit curve or the oxygen sag curve will follow the same pattern as we were discussing yesterday. Okay, the pattern is the same, but where it touches, when it touches, that depends on the amount of contaminants that you are putting into the water and the state of your original water. Both those will have a major influence. So this curve which is formed, so you can see that initially there is some DO, but after you add, there is going to be a decrease in DO. Then there will be a time, by the time you reach your degradation, active degradation zone, the DO is reaching the critical or the least value. The DO is reaching its least value and the deficit is reaching its maximum value. So please be very clear with these two. DO concentration is what oxygen is present in the water at that point, but DO deficit is the difference between the dissolved oxygen and the DO concentration. So deficit is maximum, but the DO concentration is the least at that point. So that point is called as the critical point. So by this time, we would have crossed the zone of active degradation or decomposition, and we will be entering into the recovery stage. So this is the pattern that is formed by the oxygen sag curve. But at the same time, we have so you can see that your deoxygenation curve, which is also going in a downward state, because every time this is the remaining oxygen present. Understood? So, yeah. Okay, so This is the what to say, re-aeration or re-oxygenation curve. So this is what I was trying to explain just sometime when Sanju was telling that whenever this activity is happening, also oxygen is still getting dissolved in the water from the natural air which is coming in contact. But at all these times, the oxygen is getting used up. Whatever is dissolving is getting used up for the degradation activity. But there will be a time when there is a recovery happening and there is some oxygen which is remaining in the water because most of the organisms or organic matter has completed its degradation. So you have the reoxygenation or re-aeration curve like this. Okay. So this is the oxygen sat curve which we have looked at in the last class yesterday. And these are two values which I want you to remember at 0 degrees and 30 degrees. Okay, we talked about the deoxygenation curve and the re-aeration curve. So the rate of deoxygenation depends upon two factors, mainly the amount of organic matter remaining to be oxidized at any given point of time and the temperature. So the rate of deoxygenation, removal of oxygen. The variation of depletion of DO content of the stream with time is depicted by the deoxygenation curve in the absence of aeration. Aeration will be happening, but that oxygen will be getting used up. When the DO content of the stream is gradually consumed due to the, read this as organic matter because BOD is otherwise organic matter. Atmosphere supplies the oxygen continuously to the water through the process of re-aeration. So re-oxygenation or re-aeration, the term meaning is the continuous dissolving of oxygen from the atmosphere into the water, which is causing the amount of oxygen in the water to rise. But when the degradation zone and the active decomposition zone is happening, there this oxygen, what was getting dissolved, is immediately getting used up for the degradation activity. But beyond that, during the recovery and the clear zone, you will see that the re-aeration, there is a constant which is derived from that. We'll come to that later. Okay, we looked at dilution into the sea and we looked at factors that will govern. Okay, the large quantity of volume that is available, the mixing with currents, understood? Discharging it at depth into the water and all these factors, the velocity of flow, all these things are responsible for that. And we talked about land removal or a treatment on land. This is a very important concept because in some areas, for example, if you are not having a river, there will be many cities. Let us take cities because cities are going to be the ones that are going to have maximum amount of wastewater generated. So many cities will be there where there is no provision of water at all, water body to dispose. Then what can be done? It has to be disposed of on land only, or else it has to be reused. So we have to think of a condition where reusing is not happening and then they want to find a place to dispose. So first, the priority, now when they talk about wastewater, the first priority is recycle and reuse. It's not disposal at all. But even with all that recycle, reuse and all, there will be situations where disposal is required. So here, in a situation where disposal into water bodies is not possible, the next alternative is to dispose it off on land, which we call as land treatment. So when we are trying to dispose it off on land, we have some part of this wastewater going away as evaporation or vapors, and the other part of it percolating into the soil. And since the wastewater has got a large constituent of nutrients, especially the nitrates and phosphates. Maybe small concentration of your micro elements also could be there, but majorly you have this concentration more in your wastewater. Hence, the fertilizing value of the wastewater cannot be ignored, and hence it can be used for what is termed as sewage farming. So all of you are clear with the word sewage farming. Using it as or in place for irrigation. And there are three broad processes where what is done in terms of sewage farming or land treatment. One is called as the broad irrigation of sewage, or broad irrigation you can call it. Second one is rapid infiltration, and the third one is called as overland runoff. Okay, so if you can, I think I showed you the figure also in the last class for that matter. Okay, broad irrigation. So the first two processes, your sewage farming or broad irrigation and rapid infiltration, are percolating processes, slowly seeping into the water. Are percolating processes where water moves through the soil and enters into the land through the particles of soil. So it actually has an action of filtration plus the absorption into the soil. So if there are any organic matter or particulates present, those particulates will get trapped like your sand filters. Your soil particles and layers of soil will act the same way, and it will filter the water. While the percolating capacity depends on the soil characteristic, the infiltration depends upon how much of solids are present. Suppose solids are present, what is the problem that can cause? You know, you have grains of soil, and as the liquid is entering, suppose the solid floating matter or something is clogging the pores between the soil media, then the infiltration into the ground will be affected. Okay, so it should be very careful that you do not just pour the water so fast onto the ground. It should be allowed to seep through the ground slowly. So if the waste is sufficiently pre-treated, so yesterday I think Yaksha was the one who asked me, are we talking about disposal into water and land without treatment? No, that's not allowed at all. Understood? Though under some worst conditions, sometimes it would be done, but then it causes a hell of a lot of problem, whether it is in water or whether it is in land. On land, it is even more a problem because these solids will just go and close all the pores of the soil, and then you will have a marsh-like situation created, and the water will start stinking in few hours because it will clog the pores and it will not go down through the soil media. So if some pre-treatment is given, this clogging can be minimized, and you can have a better rate of percolation. For percolation, 6 to 25 millimeters per minute. That's a good percolation rate or penetration rate into the soil. The rapid infiltration, okay, may be used for waste disposal and for groundwater recharge. I think I told about groundwater recharge in the last class. Some in a city or a place where no water body is there, they cannot dispose it by water. They don't want to use the treated wastewater for any other purpose or recycled purposes. They want to use that, or they don't have any agriculture. Then where to use it for land farming? That also is not possible. So then what best method can be done? That time what can be done is, this water can be used to replenish the underground water. That's called as groundwater recharge. You can make a simple pit in your ground, fill it with different layers of aggregates, sand, which is like filter. Then you pass your treated wastewater into that pit. Okay, the water will filter through the media and then go into the surrounding soil. But it will reach the groundwater which is there. And very high water table areas, this is a very good practice because you will get sufficient groundwater available to you for all your other purposes. In the technique of what we call as overland runoff, it is applied when the soil has very less permeability. So the soil is not loamy or sandy, which is getting the water to be pulled. So it is not actually a very good disposal method, but as the water flows over, if you have plantations where it doesn't require too much of water, this particular method can be used for allowing the water to probably irrigate the land surface. Now, there are also some methods called as, okay, this also we will just discuss and then we will go. Conditions favorable for the using of land treatment. So we looked at conditions which are favorable for disposal into water bodies or for sea. Okay, take it deep into the sea, dispose it at a very low level, allow it to mix with currents. Okay, remove large floating matter. All such things which are making it large volumes of water should be there so that the small quantity of sewage is getting dispersed in large volumes, etc. But what are the conditions which become favorable when you want to use it for land treatment? Okay, the first one is when natural rivers are not located. This was what I was trying to tell you in the previous example. You are having a city where there is no water body only, no river. There are situations where such things may come. So then what to do? Well, in the vicinity, you do not have any such water body. When rivers are very, thin streams, so there is no water coming in the river, just a trickle is there. So in that trickle, if you're going to pour out huge volumes of water, you will be as well putting the wastewater into the stream. So there is no dilution that's going to happen. So in such cases also, you may have to look at land treatment. When there is plenty land and the land has got the nature of soil is sandy, loamy or alluvial soil with sand or gravel available at the bottom. So such types of soils are very, very pervious, best like your filter media requirement. So such soils, and they will be very aerated soils. So you have to take two examples of soil in mind, which both you have seen in your GT lab: clay soil and sandy soil. Okay, so sand particles are very spread apart. So the air content or void content, you have studied about void ratio, etc., of everything. So you know that it will hold a lot of air. So oxygen content will be present more in such soils, whereas a clay, which is a compact soil, will not have so much of voids. So the amount of the air present also will be lower. So loamy, sandy or alluvial soils which have got a base of sand or gravel is very aerated and can maintain aerobic conditions for very long time. So if you actually have done a little bit of pre-treatment for your water and then allowing them to soak through such sand or loam soil, because of the aerated nature of the soil, if there are any fine organic matter which is getting trapped in the soil, it also gets completely decomposed by the organisms, and then your water will just trickle down slowly to your underground layers. So it becomes very beneficial. Now, arid climate, dry or near desert conditions, such places, land treatment is possible. Land treatment is also used when you have subsoil water or water table, what we call as groundwater table, is quite low. So we know that in places where the groundwater table is very high, suppose you are digging a trench for a foundation itself, water will start accumulating in the trench because your groundwater table is very high. Such places, if you are trying to dispose of your wastewater, you will be causing a sort of waterlogging condition. Okay, but whereas in a place where they say that we are trying to dig a bore, we have gone 500 feet, 600 feet, 700 feet, no water. such places, sometimes even the groundwater table will be so low that you will be able to use your water to go down to the groundwater without causing any form of waterlogging there. So in such cases, the land treatment is very favorable. Land treatment is also favored where you have low rainfall and there is a lot of demand for agriculture. So places like North Karnataka where agriculture is commonly practiced, but low rainfall areas in some places, not every place, I will not say every place, some places. In such areas, this water, treated wastewater, can be very beneficially disposed of on land. Then another one is cash crops, growing of cash crops. All of you know about cash crops, rubber, tobacco, cotton. These are all cash crops, and many of them are not cash crops that require too much of water. They require irrigation at regular intervals of time or require water at regular intervals of time, but they do not require water in large quantities as other crops. So here also you can think about using land treatment. So now, without my asking that question itself, it should come to your mind, how can you compare dispersal or disposal on water and disposal on land? It's a very big thing that you need to think of, because every state, every city may not have the same conditions for disposal. You are not able to use your treated wastewater. Then how do you achieve it? It's a very big question which you need to think of. Now, there are methods of application of wastewater. So previous to this, I told you there are 3 processes which we called as the broad irrigation, rapid infiltration, or overland runoff. So these were the 3 principal processes. Now these processes, if we have to use and apply the wastewater to the land, how can we do it? So here we have what is called as sprinkler irrigation, subsurface irrigation, and surface irrigation. So what do you mean by sprinkler irrigation? All of you have seen this irrigation happening in the college campus. They use what are called as sprinklers, where water is dispersed of in fine droplets on the surface. So on the surface of the land itself, you will have sprinklers which are sprinkling the water to the surface, and from the surface the water will slowly infiltrate into the underlying ground. Whereas the process of subsurface irrigation, so anybody can give me an example of subsurface irrigation? Anyone? Anyone can give me an example of how subsurface irrigation happens? Have you heard of drip irrigation, anyone?
Yes, ma'am.
What is drip irrigation? How is it? Okay, Subhashri, I think. Subhashri, how is sprinkler irrigation and drip irrigation different from your knowledge?
Ma'am, sprinkler irrigation is it is from above the ground surface, ma'am. Drip irrigation, in the pipes they'll make holes where the plants, ma'am.
Where they will make the holes? Can you repeat?
Ma'am, where the plants, no, ma'am, there they'll make small holes.
But there is a difference. I'll just explain that. So sprinkler, all of you have seen. I'm not going to repeat because you've seen it in the college, right? Drip irrigation, when they are doing this, they will have small pipes laid across the land, okay? And these pipes will have small perforations. And one extra point to what Subhashri said is, where the root zone of the plant is coming, no, water will be discharged there. Clear? That is called as subsurface irrigation. So you have sprinkler irrigation, or we call it as spray irrigation, where through nozzles, the pipes will be spraying the sewage under some pressure. Whereas in the case of subsurface irrigation, the liquid or water, so actually drip irrigation will use up less water because the water that is getting wasted by evaporation and getting trapped in the layers of soil, which part of the plant needs the water? It is only the root place, right? So if you are actually supplying, the root is say 30 centimeter below the ground and you're applying water on the surface, then part of the water is lost because of evaporation from the surface, and the remaining thing, as it is penetrating this 30 centimeters, may get trapped somewhere there. So if you imagine a pipe running at the root zone of the plant, and at the base where the root is, there is a small nozzle or an opening through which water is coming out in droplets, the root zone will be kept wet. That is what is called as subsurface irrigation. Then you have the most common irrigation, which is called as surface irrigation. Like in paddy fields and all, what do? They just create small separations in the field of paddy and they will allow it, like we do curing on roofs, right? All of you have seen that. They use small mud partitions to form small tracks, separate chambers like, and they allow water to remain there. That is one type of surface irrigation. Like that, there are different types of surface irrigation. Okay, in some agricultural land, what they will do, over the entire land, many furrows or channels, like not very deep, but furrows will be made and water will be circulated through the furrows. So you will have a large tract of land which is uniformly divided lengthwise into different patches with furrows in between them, and the water will be circulating through these furrows or channels. So water is automatically seeping into the land where the agriculture is taking place. So all these can be called as surface irrigation. So method of application and all, you just have to understand and you should give an answer because it comes as a direct question. So please remember, all this we can be asked together. Land treatment, what are the conditions favorable? The three broad processes, which is broad irrigation, rapid infiltration and runoff, and the method by which we apply the wastewater to the land. Clear? So today's class, we'll have a quick rewind. I'm again and again repeating, please go through that oxygen SAD curve, oxygen deficit figure, and how you are explaining about the re-aeration and deoxygenation. Without that, when we come to the Streeter-Phelps formula where they derive an expression, it will become very difficult for you to understand what we are trying to do. So I think I told you in the last class also, when you have a curve like this, now this is time. Suppose I say 10 days from the date of applying the sewage into the water, what will be the condition of BOD? 10 days. Or what will be the dissolved oxygen concentration? Remember, when we studied about the BOD, I gave you, or the dilution method, I gave you an expression to find out what will be the concentration of BOD final when you mix it with water. So if you remember this, the concentration finally will be the concentration of BOD in the sewage into the quantity of sewage plus the concentration of BOD in the river. There will be some organic matter in the river, right? With the quantity of water or discharge in the river. So if I'm talking about this in meter cube per second, BOD in sewage into so many meter cube per second plus BOD in the river into what is the discharge in the river, meter cube per second, divided by the total discharge. So when I mix a particular concentration of BOD or waste into the river water, the final combo liquid will have a concentration of this. So coming back to your oxygen SAD curve, you will be deriving and arriving at expressions where at a particular point of time after disposing, suppose they give you that the initial BOD of your wastewater is so much, the river water contains at the point of disposal so much BOD, Okay, so you will be able to calculate what is the final BOD present there after mixing. Now they will tell what is the BOD or DO concentration at 3 days from the point of disposal, or hours if they're talking about in terms of hours, at so many hours from the point of disposal, etc. So kindly understand perfectly what this graph means. Okay. Anybody has any questions with respect to today's class?
Ma'am, I have
Yaksha, tell.
Ma'am, we have seen that the treatment is done to sea or land, no, ma'am, now.
Yeah, currently we have only 2 methods. No, it is done to rivers also.
Yes, so
Yeah.
water and the land.
We have only 2, yes, 2 methods, correct.
My question is, how will we transport, or how is that water from the treatment plant reaching that particular destination, to
Yeah.
that land or to that place?
So that is
where-
what I was telling. Suppose you have a town which has got a nearest water body, feasibly or practically possible to carry it. Now, river water for drinking purpose, we are bringing from 200 kilometers away, correct? But when you have to lay a pipe to carry wastewater that much of distance, it may not be feasible. So there will be 3 conditions which are favoring which of these methods you will choose. First, is it possible for you to reuse your wastewater for secondary purposes? Bangalore city tries to do that, but not from all the treatment plants. Okay. In Vrishbhavati, there is about 180 MLD getting treated. In that, 60 MLD of water goes through what is called as the tertiary treatment. That is the 3rd stage treatment. Your carbon filter and all these things come. So the water comes not drinking water quality, but fit for industrial processes. And there are companies like Toyota, and you know that Bidadi Industrial Estate, many of you would have heard. There are many companies in those areas which are buying those waters, and that is not sent through pipelines, it is sent through tankers. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am.
That is one example. Second example is our Yelahanka next to Purna Prajna College, we have a treatment unit for Yelahanka residential and this industrial area. The treated water is carried via pipeline to BIAL International, your Bangalore International Airport. And your airport, landscaping and secondary uses, all that water comes from treated wastewater. Okay. What is Bangalore city trying to do? Making use of the treated, because getting all the liquid coming from Bangalore treated to that particular level is difficult. Clear? At the same time, Hebbal, there is a treatment unit where after treatment, the treated wastewater can be sent into Hebbal and other lakes which are in that surrounding area. Clear?
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about, Bangalore city. So 3 criteria will be there. 1, whether the water can be reused for purposes within the city. If so, it has to be commuted by trucks or pipelines. That's the only way. So because Bangalore is a comfortably economically upward city, you may be able to afford laying the pipeline and things like that. But think of a smaller town which is a little more in the rural area where they don't have the infrastructure or financial stability to do such big projects. They will look at the nearest water body, use it there. Okay, no water body surrounding, they are completely landlocked. Then what is the other option? Use it for irrigation. Now, irrigation land is also not there. Okay, suppose, imagine it is a little, rare situation, but even if we say there is no irrigation land or no land that then they will use it for groundwater recharging. That can be done from individual houses itself. You don't even have to, have a complete treatment plant to do it. But if there is a treatment plant and there is wastewater getting treated there, they still don't know what to do it with the waste to treat water, they can do it as groundwater recharge.
Okay, ma'am. Thank
Is
you
your
so much.
question answered?
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. So please answer your attendance. I'm just stopping the class.
Tell them that they have to attend level 15. They're supposed to log in for the webinar.
Yeah.